I'm giving my play of the day, Peter, to the government tactics team. The government as a whole, essentially, for, I reckon, the first sustained question time assault on probably any topic, but importantly on industrial relations. The government, Malcolm Turnbull, has been accused of not running hard enough of this from time to time, not focusing enough on it during the election, even though it was the reason for the double dissolution. Now they're moving to actually bring the legislation back into the parliament. Today we did see, at least for that first hour of question time, almost every question, in fact, from the Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, the Treasurer, the Minister for Immigration, the Minister for Justice, everyone weighing in on why the ABCC is needed, why the CFMEU is out of control on the construction industry, and why we need to bring back the ABCC. Whatever you think of the merits of this, there was a much, much better argument mounted by the government as a whole today as to why they need to do this. I'll play for you Peter Dutton, who probably earned his reputation as the government head kicker by being the bluntest on this today when he roped in the bikies connection to the CFMEU. Have a look.
One of the great achievements of this government has been to cancel the visas of criminals in this country, people who have perpetrated crimes on Australian citizens, and we've cancelled the visas now of over 100 outlaw motorcycle gang members, many of them with links to, guess which organisation? The CFMEU. The CFMEU. Now, people have written to me and said, Minister, thank you for cancelling the visa of that bikie that broke the arm of my employee. Thank you for cancelling the visa of that bikie who perpetrated this crime against my family.
Peter, we just don't see this often enough under this government. A coordinated question time assault, and I think it worked for them today, so that's why they get my play of the day for the tactics.
What does that say as a general comment about the Leader of the House, Christopher Pyne? You say that you don't often see a coordinated question time attack from the government, David Spears. You
don't. Look, often they'll try and cover this off and that off and something else, but when they stick to, and you can't do it every day, it needs to be, a good reason for doing so.
Who do we blame for that, though?
With the legislation coming in. Oh, look,
it's the whole tactics committee, really.
Blame. Exactly. And as I say, you can't do it every day, but there is a case for doing it, and I think it worked for them very effectively today. Now, the chances of getting this legislation through, they probably are looking somewhat improved now. We'll see what happens with Bob Day's replacement in the Senate. We can talk about that a little later on. David Leyonhjelm, I'm going to be talking to on the program this afternoon. He previously backed it. But he's wavering a little bit because he feels miffed by the Senate voting reforms at the end of the last term. Xenophon wants some amendments. The Hanson One Nation Party sound very positive on this. So I think the chances of it getting through are looking stronger, not in a joint sitting, I should point out, but in a regular sitting, because you'd need to amend it to get the Xenophon team over the line. But they still need to pile the pressure on the Labor Party here, maximise the politics of this. And I thought they did that today.
Look, I thought they did too, to be honest, and I did think it was well coordinated. And in a sense, it was the obvious hit, wasn't it? Because they laid some of the groundwork via the media, and now they've gone and followed it up in question time. Presumably will all this week. That's what we're being led to believe. And I can tell you from talking to some of the people within the government, they're confident, or increasingly confident, that they will get that legislation passed, and their hope is that that will, in a sense, reset things for them and get them the sort of momentum that they've been craving.
It'll be a big deal. I mean, this is why the double dissolution was called. As I say, I don't know if they'll go with a joint sitting.
I doubt
because
that.
To get technical
they'll want to make the amendments, won't they?
Yeah, it has to be an unamended bill, but to get the Xenophon team, they're going to have to amend it. So I think that's probably more likely. But gee, it'd be a significant win for them to get this of all bills.
And
through,
you know what? I couldn't disagree more. I couldn't agree more, I should say, because at the end of the day, this is something that they absolutely want to get through. As you say, it was the premise to the entire purpose behind the original situation that they went down this path. But it's also why they need to get rid of the situation involving same-sex marriage, I would argue, because they don't want that sort of thing in the road, do they, David?
No, that's right. Anyway, Peter, what did you like today? What was your play of the day?
All right, my play of the day. Well, I'll show it to you. I went with a question from Dreyfus to Malcolm Turnbull. I've given the play of the day to Malcolm Turnbull for his response. Everyone's been watching on the inside in Canberra what's going on between Dreyfus and Brandis, and I thought that the Prime Minister mocked their dispute, probably mocking both of them on the way through, but in this instance he was targeting Dreyfus. Take a look.
I refer to reports the government is preparing to strip a dual national of Australian citizenship for the first time and that it expects the legislation to be challenged in the High Court. Is this the same legislation where a letter the Attorney-General provided to the Joint Committee on Intelligence and Security incorrectly represented advice from the Solicitor-General?
All of us understand that the Shadow Attorney-General likes to engage in a sort of Guthrie Featherstone QCMP versus Rumpole debate with the Attorney-General. I think we know that those two learned gentlemen do not entirely see eye to eye, and there is, from time to time, what can be best described as a disturbance in the bar common room, and the less erudite members of the Parliament, as to say all the rest of us, are happy to let these great advocates get on with it. We're happy to let them do it.
I mean, he was effectively mocking George Brandis every bit as much as Mark Dreyfus, as the QCs go to war incessantly. But I just thought he did a good job of, if you like, blunting the attack from Dreyfus on this one by pointing out that this is a bit of an inside-the-bubble dispute between a couple of learned gentlemen. You know, the rest of us would rather they just kind of sorted out their differences on the side.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to disagree with you strongly here, Peter, and it does get to my wooden spoon, which goes to the Prime Minister on this topic, and I'll play that in a moment. Playing this down as a disturbance in the common room, the bar common room, I mean, you know, all trying to make very much light of this, and nothing to see here, just a couple of learned gentlemen, as he puts it. This is a bit more serious than that. I sat through all of that evidence on Friday in the Senate inquiry into this, and it's more than just a bit of disagreement about the
issue itself.
New
I
rule
agree,
that George
absolutely.
Brandis has issued, because you go to the substance today. They're talking about what has Justin Gleeson, Australia's Solicitor General, our second law officer, said about the citizenship bill. He has said the bill that we were told had his sign-off did not. An earlier version did, but not the bill that was put to Parliament and ultimately voted on and passed. Now it's going to be tested, apparently. We read that there is someone about to be stripped from their citizenship, and it's going to be, we expect, tested in the High Court. Does it have the sign-off of the Solicitor General? Apparently not.
But, David, look, you know, you've just got to get on board Team Australia.
And this is the bit I was going to play. This is the bit I was going to play.
Work as one.
So here, anyway, let's play the wooden spoon then.
Right.
Yeah, let's play the wooden spoon.
I suggest he puts his personal animosity aside and speaks to the Attorney-General. If he has real concerns, he's got to get over. He's got to get over these petty personal animosities and get on our team, get on Australia's team to ensure that we have the right legislation.
He couldn't bring himself to exactly say Team Australia, which of course is a famous Tony Abbott phrase, but what did he say? Get on the team that is Australia's team. He's essentially saying here, Malcolm Turnbull, ignore the actual debate and the substance of whether the law will stand up in the High Court and what our advice is on this. Don't forget he's a barrister himself and could have given an answer here. He said, no, get on board Team Australia. It's all good. It's all about being tough on terrorists. Well, I think that's not good enough. I think that is a standout wooden spoon today, reviving the whole Team Australia line to dismiss any legitimate questioning which has come from the Solicitor General, no less, of the anti-terror laws.
And you know what? I agree with you with that being the wooden spoon. I want to get to an honourable mention in the moment, but I agree that that part of the answer is definitely a wooden spoon. What I was saying on my play of the day, that's more just the theatre of what I thought was a good response in question time. That example is the theatre of what constitutes a bad response in question time, because using that Team Australia rhetoric, it becomes a cover-up for scrutiny, whereas I thought that the wider dispute, and let's face it, these two gentlemen, Brandis and Dreyfus, they just can't seem to agree on anything. And it does often descend, and that's why I like the response from Turnbull, it does often descend into a learned debate.
But you've got to agree, Peter, there's a legitimate point here.
Sure.
I mean, maybe it is constitutional, maybe it'll hold up in the High Court, let's hope so, great. But the Solicitor General, no less, not Mark Dreyfus, the Solicitor General, the government Solicitor General, has said that wasn't my sign-off on that legislation.
Yeah, that is murky.
I agreed to an earlier version.
Yep, that's murky, and that's why I give it wooden spoon, same as you. An honourable mention, though, that up until that moment was sitting there as my wooden spoon, and I'm pretty sure I know you don't agree with this, but the Prime Minister's answer around donations. specifically donations from himself. Now, I think he's absolutely proper on this. He's absolutely reasonable in a bubble of political sentiment, if I could put it that way, in the answer that he gives. I just think, politically speaking, this issue has dragged on. I'll show the grab in a moment, but this issue has dragged on about how much he did or didn't donate to the Liberal Party for so long. I actually think they would have been better off to make a statement on this, even if that is not what is required under the Act, long before now, not necessarily today under questions in Parliament from Labor, but long before now, frankly, because this has just dogged the PM and it creates this sort of impression that he's, buying democracy, and that's what you see getting sort of claimed and thrown at him. I almost gave him the wooden spoon for an answer, which was just yet again another example of him waiting for the AEC to finally, reveal what those donations are. And this is a weight that we all agree pretty much probably needs to be reformed in the Act because it takes too long. Take a look.
Have been scrupulous in disclosures of donations and receipts of donations under the Electoral Act. And
member for Jagu is warned.
I don't wish to make a big point of it, but the honourable member opposite, of course, overlooked a donation for 8 years. Now, what the honourable member is asking me to do is to make a disclosure in advance of it being disclosed under the Act. And any disclosures that I make were made in accordance with law and to the Electoral Commission and are then disclosed by the AEC at the normal time. I comply scrupulously with the law, and the honourable member would be well advised to look to his own party to ensure that they do so too.
David, the Prime Minister is legally right, he's entirely scrupulous, etc., etc. I've got no problem with him making donations. Unions make donations, business do. What's wrong with individuals? But I do just think, politically speaking, and now wasn't the time for him to suddenly say, well, actually, here's the amount, under questioning from Labor. But I think long before now was the time for them to do it, even if the Act didn't require it.
Perhaps. Yeah, look, I'm not critical of Malcolm Turnbull today on this. He's following the Act, and I thought he explained that quite well. Let's not muck around here. The only reason Labor asked that question a couple of times a day is because they're feeling the pressure over more than $2 million in donations from the CFMEU. Now, look, I agree, it's probably not a good look that Malcolm Turnbull might have tipped in this amount to the Liberal Party during the campaign, but you disclose it when you disclose it.
And if he'd already disclosed it, maybe they wouldn't have been able to use it the way that they did today in question time. As I say, I don't expect him to suddenly blurt it out now, having not done so before now, but I think waiting for the fullness of time, it just makes it an issue, It just sits there as an issue when they could nip it in the bud and move on.
It does. But, under the current rules, people are allowed to donate that much, fine. The other thing I just want to play for you before we go is Bob Catter's question on this, because this was a runner-up for me. It was going to be the wooden spoon.
This will be a short
until
question
we got that Malcolm
if it's Bob
Turnbull
short
Team
and to the point.
Australian team. But this was about whether we should have some name and shame public register of what every CEO earns. Have a look.
Yeah.
Will the Treasurer introduce the CEO's salary and average employee wages transparency register as touted by the British Prime Minister? And will his government consider tax rates in line with other, particularly European countries, where the issue of huge and ever-widening disparity in income for the powerful is addressed by a graduated tax rate?
Now, in terms of those in senior corporate positions and what they're paid, their matters for their boards, and they are accountable to their boards, those CEOs, and those boards are accountable to their shareholders, and particularly in major companies, whether they be banks or large retail companies or whatever company it is. They have an accountability also to their customer base and the social contract they have in the economy in which they exist.
Spot on from Scott Morrison. He's absolutely right about that. And how many, rich list, CEO list, salary things do we read published? They're published all the time. Do we really need some sort of government register of what CEOs earn? A ridiculous idea, really.
Just absolute madness. But you know what? I would have been more surprised if the question had been more reasonable and to the point rather than what we